Quiet or not, in less than 2 hours, State of the Nation address like none before. A total of 30 members of Parliament will be physically present in the National Assembly, everyone else joining in online. No marching bands, no red carpet, no fanfare. A sombre and trimmed down event for these sombre and difficult times. But the content of the address will still be monitored closely as it sets the blueprint for the parliamentary year, and it shows us the plans the President has for our nation. I'm joined now by political analyst and a fellow of the Wits School of Governance, Judith. Good evening, Judith. Thank you so much for joining us. We have spoken so much over the years, and I was just wondering, in all your years watching Parliament and the openings of Parliament, is this for you perhaps the strangest?
It certainly is the most different. Good evening, Sally. It is the most different. It takes place in an unprecedented time, not only for South Africa, but for people around the globe. And I think that it is about time that we pared down the parliamentary ceremony. I'm delighted that we are doing without red carpets and fashion parades and milliners' nightmares. And so let's get down to the real business of what the State of the Nation address is. So it will be unusual. It will be strange to see. One of the wonderful things about the opening of Parliament and SONA, of course, Sally, is, you know, the marching in of the Constitutional Court judges, the two houses of Parliament sitting together. There is a sense of democracy at work, and that is an important show. And so it's a pity that we don't see that, but these are indeed unprecedented times and very dark times for many people in our country who've lost loved ones and people who are sick in the hospital, and our healthcare workers who certainly are taking the strain.
Yeah, so it's absolutely appropriate and of course necessary, because we need to keep socially distant. But you know, we understand that this SONA, State of the Nation address, is costing around 100,000 rand. It's normally at least $1 million or $2 million. You seem to be suggesting we maybe don't need the pomp and ceremony going forward. Yes, it's nice to see democracy in action, but maybe it's not worth all that money, particularly given the economic challenges. You know, if we just cast our mind back to last year, the message from the President, he was very much seized with the economic challenges the country was facing, little knowing, perhaps as any of us did, the massive economic challenge that COVID-19 would bring. But he spoke a lot about partnerships, working together, social compacts to grow jobs, grow our economy. Do you think this year it's going to be all about COVID-19, from the vaccine rollout to dealing with corruption? Do you think that's going to absolutely dominate?
Well, I think what will dominate is the COVID-19 pandemic, no doubt. And the President, I'm quite sure, will talk about those social partnerships. Now, those social partnerships have a sort of patchy record over the past years, as these allies, the business, government and Labour, haven't seen eye to eye on many issues. And so we've got an economy in the doldrums. So the partnerships will be key, particularly on COVID-19, because you're going to need those partnerships if we are indeed going to roll out the vaccine as planned. And on that, Sally, I think that the President's speech tonight really has to give us some concrete detail about which vaccine, how many vials, when, where, how, because we haven't heard much detail. We've heard a lot of numbers being bandied about, but for me, this is the central constitutional and governance challenge that we face, is this right to healthcare, this equitable access with regard to this vaccine and how we roll it out. We need to have the details so that we can all hold government to account for what they're promising. At the heart of this constitution, incidentally, which we celebrate 25 years of its existence today, is this right to dignity and this right of people to have healthcare. And so this is really an important moment for transparent governance as well. And the President needs to provide us with details on that certainly tonight.
Judith, Thulasizwe speaking this side. Politically, how strong or weakened is the position of the President, particularly given the record that he has been able to establish since coming into office some two and a half years ago, on the back of promises of a new dawn, fighting corruption, yet we have seen a number of instances where actually corruption has continued, and it seems, at least politically inside the ANC, there's not much room for him to maneuver on some of these questions, certainly in as far as they relate to how the ANC projects itself on issues such as corruption.
Certainly, Tullis, and this is the burning issue as well, because we've seen, what COVID-19 has done is it's laid bare all the challenges that we have. And we saw early on the large-scale corruption, particularly around PPE contracts. And you saw the SIU head, Advocate Andy Matibi, who's valiantly trying to collect, recoup some of this money. You've got the president's own spokesperson in a never-ending suspension, given allegations of corruption around her. And I think, Thulasizwe, your point is the president comes to Parliament tonight. He comes to Parliament beleaguered with everything that's going on with the economy, with the global pandemic and healthcare crises. But also he comes as there is a concerted assault, on our democracy. And I do think the president needs to talk tonight about the supremacy of the Constitution and the rule of law, given the former President Jacob Zuma's utterances regarding the Zondo Commission, and then Esma Khashila and Jesse Duarte in tow, and various other members of the ANC. And he comes to Parliament with that on his plate, but also he comes to Parliament with his enemies within the party, the factions, and we know they exist despite the fact that the ANC likes to pretend that they don't. The unity that we see is a farce. And so he comes with people desperately wanting to unseat him. And there's a national conference coming up. So this is a very testing time for him politically. My view has always been that he's been hesitant to expend his political capital. And I think he should, because I think he'd find that there are far more people outside of the ANC willing to form strong alliances with him if he takes a more powerful stance on issues of corruption and also issues of the economy and the various decisions he has to make.
Judith, very quickly, it's also local elections this year. Well, we think. We don't have much detail. Yes. Do you think he's likely to touch on that this evening?
Well, I guess he will mention it, Sally. Look, an election is never far from a politician's mind, and Cyril Ramaphosa will be trying to use this moment. You know, it's going to be his face on the T-shirts, and he knows that in the last national election, it was his face on the T-shirt that won it for the ANC, because it was, Jacob Zuma was causing the ANC to bleed support. So he will want to use this moment and to project that. He certainly will talk about it. How much detail he will give, obviously, it's up to the IEC looking at dates and so on, but it will be very different. And it's going to be an acid test for our democracy as well, one of many, because, do we look at more coalition government? That means more instability if the past is a predictor of the future. And so these are testing times for an ANC weakened and hollowed out by corruption, but also for state institutions, which I think when President Ramaphosa came into power as president, he hadn't had the full idea of quite how hollowed out our state institutions are, the lack of capacity to deliver on even the most basic things. And he's getting a sense of that. He's got a sense of that, certainly. He knows. And that makes his life even more complicated, because the one thing he needs to do is to deliver on these promises.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Political analyst and fellow of the Wits School of Governance, Judith February.